So everyone, thank you for coming to the privacy talk. I'm very privileged to invite Daniel from Hagu. He's working a very important role at the police space, and I'm so proud to be speaking with him together. So Daniel, thank you for coming this interview.
Corey, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm looking forward to our talk.
So first of all, I'd like to share his profile. Daniel is Data Protection Officer and Head of the Data Protection Function at Europol. Daniel grew up in Hamburg. He holds a Master of Law from University of Hamburg. Prior to starting his further professional education at Hessentech Court in Hamburg, Daniel worked as a contract lawyer for Media Group in Hamburg. He joined the legal service at Europol in 2003. He went on to become a confidentiality officer with responsibility in the area of data security, security clearances, handling of classified information, and was secrecy to the Europol Security Committee. In 2007, he was selected as head of the Information Integrity Unit, responsible for data protection and data security compliance. In 2010, the Europol Management Board appointed him as Data Protection Officer and head of Europol's Data Protection Unit. In 2015, he founded the Europol Data Protection Expert Network, EDEN. The EDEN community consists of over 800 active members from law enforcement, industries, academia, and non-governmental organizations. Daniel chairs the annual EDEN conferences. He contributes as a speaker to international data protection conferences and seminars, including CPDP and MIS Annual Audit Conference. He is co-founder and lecturer to the certification course for data protection officers at the European Institute for Public Administration, EIPA, and the summer courses on criminal law and data protection law at Academy for European Law, ERA. Daniel is author of articles related to data protection and law enforcement and publishes inter alia in the Oxford Law Journal Computer Law and Security Review. Since 2021, he is a member of CEPOL expert group on fundamental rights. So that's a very great remarks to introduce your profile, Daniel. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Roy, for the kind introduction.
Thank you. So let's move on to today's agenda. First of all, I'm very interested in why you started to work at the Europol, because Europol is a very important role in European unions, and it's very important to protect the citizens and to protect the fundamental rights as well. So could you tell us why did you start the legal work, and why did you join the Europol?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kohei, for this question. I understand these are actually two questions. The one thing is, why did I start in data protection? And the other question is actually why I started then at the European Police Office. Well, I started in data protection many years ago. You kindly outlined a bit my background, and but I think a very decisive moment was for me, since I'm from Germany, the year 1983, where in Germany the Constitutional Court actually had one very, very important decision at that time. And this was about a decision about data collection under the Census Act. And it was the first time actually that data protection got into the spotlight of society. And this court decision was very important because it was designing a right to informational self-determination in Germany. It was the first time that it was made clear that the fundamental right of data protection means that the individual actually, it is up to the individual actually to disclose information about him or herself. And so that had, of course, I was at that time at high school, and I read it in the newspapers. And but what was for me a reason actually then to think more about data protection and even write at that time in my high school newspaper a whole article about this decision of the German Constitutional Court was not so much about this self-determination and data protection as such, but as for me as a high school student, it was the decisive point was that at that time, since there was this public discussion on the Census Act, the state had to decide who actually goes to collect these data in the houses, visit families and ask them, please provide us with information about your household, for example. And there at the time, the German state called upon teachers to do this for them, to help the state to do this. And for me as a high school student, that was then a bridge too far. That I said, well, if the teachers are now going into the house, I have to write something about this in the school magazine. And that was basically my start when it comes to data protection. And I never really left this topic. That means also doing my law studies, part of the law studies I dedicated also into the area of data protection, because at that time the University of Hamburg was quite vocal on the question of data protection. And also when I did then the further education as a lawyer, I had the possibility to go for a training for 6 months to the Data Protection Authority of my hometown in Hamburg. And there, by coincidence actually, I then was sent to an office in the Data Protection Authority that already at that time took care of data protection in the police and justice sector. And there, I had always an interest in criminal law, but then now it came together, data protection and criminal law and the work of law enforcement. And then there was, of course, there had to be a decision made career-wise. What do you want to do? You want to stay in the area of supervision and work on that side, or actually work in law enforcement and support law enforcement regarding data protection compliance. And then there was the possibility for me to join Europol, where I then applied. And first, as you rightfully said, I worked not in data protection, although Europol is an organization that since 1999 is strong in data protection, also with the strong tailor-made data protection framework. But I started in the area of confidentiality, IT security. So always protection of information, but not from the viewpoint of fundamental rights. Then also at Europol, data protection became more and more important over the years. And then there was the possibility to change from confidentiality, IT security, registration of classified information into the area of data protection compliance. And I was very happy that this was possible. And if you ask me why, let's say as a data protection expert, I decided to join law enforcement, I have to say that I think that when we talk about data protection, and if we talk about the hotspots of data protection, that is certainly also in the activities of law enforcement. So I was very keen actually to go in exactly in this area where the risks are high for data subjects on the one side, but on the other side, where you can also have really a strong impact on the protection of citizens and support law enforcement to handle a tailor-made framework that they have to operate. And last but not least, what I find particular interesting in data protection, and that was also the reason why I stayed in data protection, is that data protection is, although I'm by training, I'm a lawyer, data protection is multidisciplinary. So it is not just legal, it is also IT security, it is also confidentiality, it is fundamental rights, it is legal compliance. So I think the multidisciplinary aspect of data protection is something that fascinated me at that time, but is still fascinating me in my daily work.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your history. I agree that multidisciplinary is been very important in data protection space. That is why I'm also be admired in this space to talk with the different background, different expertise, and then being inclusive, the processing to secure the environments for the fundamental rights. As a next question is about talking the Europol itself, because a lot of the people just heard about the Europol, but they actually unaware what the Europol is doing. So could you share about the Europol and what is your role as a Europol there?
Yes, thanks, Gohit. So, of course, with pleasure. So I'm working for Europol. Europol is the EU law enforcement agency. So that means that Europol is part of the EU public service. And as a law enforcement agency, we support the EU member states in preventing and combating organized crime, cybercrime, and terrorism. And we do this since 1999. The first legal framework of Europol was the Europol Convention, and already at that time, part of the Europol Convention was already a tailor-made data protection framework for Europol. If you want as an information hub between EU law enforcement agencies. In terms of size, we talk about an agency with more than 1,400 staff members. We are based in The Hague, in the Netherlands. With us at Europol, they're working more than 250 liaison officers that are the connecting link to the national police forces. But they work here in The Hague with us in the same building. Not only liaison officers, by the way, from EU member states, but also from outside the EU. So, for example, we have a Japanese liaison office here at Europol, next to the liaison offices of the other third states we are working with together. Europol has a multi-agency approach. So that means we are not talking just about liaison with the police, but if I can give an example, when we talk about Italian law enforcement, we are not only cooperating with the Polizia di Stato, but we also have a representative of the Carabinieri and the Guardia Finanza here at Europol in the headquarters. And that makes cooperation between Europol, but also amongst member states, much easier, because law enforcement cooperation is also that you have the possibility on short notice to sit together with the colleagues that have the possibility to support multinational investigations. And this is possible here at Europol in our headquarters. If we don't sit together in person, then we communicate, of course, with the secure lines. That means that we have from Europol 2,600 plus secure lines that go from The Hague across the world, if you want. We have here at Europol 24/7 operation center. So it's not that we work here 9 to 5, but we work around the clock, and we are available to support analysis projects that are focusing on different crime areas. Where we are working in these analysis projects with more than 160 crime analysts that are also based here in The Hague. We have and we maintain and we operate in the so-called Europol Information System. If you want, this is police record system within the EU. And just to give you one number, we have there more than 1.5 million objects. in this Europol information system. This is information about offenses, individuals involved or linked to crimes, suspected persons, convicted persons. So this is that is one of the biggest systems that we hold here, and we operate all this on the basis of a tailor-made data protection framework. So tailor-made data protection framework doesn't mean this is not obeying to the general data protection principles that you also find in the general data protection regulation, but tailor-made for the mandate of Europol. And it is this framework is distinct from the framework that is applied in the national police of the EU member states, because this framework is shaped, as you know, according to the law enforcement directive next to the GDPR. But it is tailor-made because Europol is in a particular position. We are the information hub. We hold a vast amount of sensitive information, and we are used also as information highway, if you want, with our information system, exchange system, which is called Sienna, where we actually in the system have data protection safeguards integrated. And for these systems, we need tailor-made rules. This we operate now already since the Europol Convention in 1999. Today, the framework is called Europol Regulation, which was amended in June last year. I think for those of the listeners that are not familiar with Europol, they might be familiar of how Europol sometimes is portrayed in fiction. And I think they are very important is to say that if you look at Ocean's 11, the movie, or if you look at the Chestnut Man, which is now a recent Netflix movie, there you see Europol agents using weapons, arresting people. So one of the limits of Europol's mandate is we are not allowed to use coercive powers. And I think that is important to say. We are here to support cross-border information exchange and analysis. We get more possibilities with our legal framework, but this is our core business, and that makes us distinct from the national police forces in the member states. Since 2010, Europol is an agency of the EU, so there was a change in the legal framework. And also since then, we have a formally appointed data protection officer. So that is me. I'm appointed a data protection officer in the European Police Office. And my main task as data protection officer in the European Police Office is to act as an assurance provider to management. So to provide my judgment and my advice regarding data protection compliance of the different processing operations at Europol. And apart from that, I'm a second-line assurance provider for police data on the one side, but also of the staff data that we process at Europol. Also, this is one of my tasks, next to providing awareness, training, consultation to the controller, so advising the controller, and coordination between Europol and the data protection supervisory authorities.
Yeah, that's a very important work in police networks. I think in the digital field, like to investigate it and to inspect of the crimes is becoming a very important role. The police agency, but also the data protection is also the important to protect the fundamental rights of all the citizens. The next question is about the transitions of your activity. At the first on your profile, I explained that you start working on the European Data Protection Expert Networks, the EDEN. There is a very important functions to aggregate of the knowledge networks with the experts over the world. So could you share about these networks? Then how have you developed this network as a strong community?
Thank you very much, Guy. That is indeed what is particular at Europol, and has, by the way, also the full support of Europol's top management. And we are talking here about the Europol Data Protection Experts Network. And this is now operating since 2016. And it was an initiative by the Data Protection Office of Europol, where we said we understand that data protection and law enforcement is in the focus of the public and also of the political debate. And before 2016 and also still today, often either myself or one of my colleagues were invited to join discussions on law enforcement and data protection on public events. And at that time, we understood that there are not a lot of law enforcement representatives that actually take part in these discussions. And I think these discussions have to take place, and they should be transparent, and they should be public. And at that time, we decided to say why we don't gather those independently, whether they're law enforcement officers or academics, for example, or data protection experts in industries that somewhere are connected to law enforcement, why we don't gather them and give them a forum and have an expert discussion in this forum. And it started very small, I have to say, in 2016. I remember we had a conference at that time, in the first Eden conference, one of the first Eden conferences in Copenhagen. I think we were around 100 to 120 participants. And today, the Europol Data Protection Experts Network Eden has more than 800 members. We had 3 weeks ago, we had our 13th conference in Madrid, together with the colleagues from national law enforcement and also the Spanish EU presidency. And there were 250 participants that traveled to Spain to take part in this conference. And if you have a look to the conference program, which you can do on the website of the European Law Academy, because we have a cooperation with the European Law Academy, then you will see we try to put all the hot topics that are there when we talk about law enforcement and data protection on this program. We invite colleagues where we believe they can provide interesting contributions to this, and we have good discussions. The overall goal is actually to shape an awareness regarding the challenges, and also to provide law enforcement also the possibility to share experiences when it comes to data protection compliance as well. And the core group of this Eden are actually the data protection officers of the national police forces. So and the data protection officers of the national police forces in the EU, they meet at least 3 times per year for an operational meeting. So this is really like you would say, yeah, the police experts meet on the fight against synthetic drugs. Is an operational meeting, but the data protection officers in the EU member states, they also meet, and they have operational meetings as well. They are operational meetings because it is about how to, as internal assurance provider, to provide, to shape data protection compliance in law enforcement. And I'm very proud of this, I have to say. The meetings are very fruitful and absolutely necessary. Because we, of course, on the one side, we cooperate with the controller, but we also cooperate with supervisory authorities. And there it is very important that we have the link between the data protection officers and the different police agencies. So this is the core group. And next to this core group, there is this conference that we have once per year. And we are always proud that so many colleagues from all areas of society are joining us and staying in contact with us over the year. And also for your listeners and your community, Koei, if there is an interest to join this network, please just write me an email. And because this is a network by invitation, and we will get in contact and we can see whether we can be together in this network and shaping the progress there.
Yeah, that's amazing, the initiative. Then I suppose that there is many experts should be involved to get together to create the more data protected environments, not just only for the police, but also the entire society, which is very important. The strong commitment from you and your colleagues. That's been amazing work. As the next topics, this is also the very curious part. So you are a data protection officer at the Europol to engage and communicate with some different authority in Europe, such as the European Data Protection Supervisor. I think that you are close to work together with them to protect the human rights on the police agency. So how the Europol and the EDPS is working together this time?
Yeah, thank you for this question, Koei. I think you said that the key work you said already before, and that is the close cooperation actually between Europol and the external supervision. So Europol is supervised by, on the one side, the European Data Protection Supervisor, but the European Data Protection Supervisor is again in cooperation with the national data protection authorities, which is important because if we look how information travels in today's society, then you will see the information is collected somewhere, is then processed, is then transferred, and then again processed and transferred back. And so it is necessary that the supervisory authorities are working together to supervise actually the complete lifespan of the information, as well as the data protection officers need to work together, because otherwise you have personal data that is protected from a certain moment on and then not anymore protected, and that of course needs to be avoided. So Europol has a very powerful supervisory authority since 2017. So the European Data Protection Supervisor has a whole catalog of powers that he or she can use when it comes to the supervision of Europol. And Europol has a full respect towards the data protection supervisor. And indeed, as you said, Kohei, I think important is that the data protection can only work if you have a full cooperation between the supervision and the one supervised, always in full respect of the roles, of the different roles, and in full respect to the role of the external supervisory authority. The EDPS is on the one side, of course, inspecting Europol. On the other side, also provides us consultancy on some areas where we have our doubts, and then we contact the colleagues in the European Data Protection Supervisor for their guidance on very specific data protection matters. The EDPS comes to inspect us at least once per year. These are then days of inspection. So we're not talking just about 1 day, sometimes it's 3 days, sometimes it's 2 days. And they do this together with national data protection authorities in a joint inspection. And I would like to be very clear on this. The fact that a police force is inspected doesn't mean that there's a kind of mistrust towards the police force, or that there is a lack of trust between the supervision and the agency. It is simply necessary. And I think it is part of, in a democratic society, of checks and balances, that these inspections, formal inspections, take place. Then there are inspection reports. There's also an annual report of the European Data Protection Supervisor, where he reports then on his activities, also with regard to Europol. And last but not least, I think the role of the data protection supervisor is in particular important in the area of police and law enforcement, because at the end, in some areas, the supervisor also provides an indirect access to police information for citizens that are concerned about the processing of personal data by the police. So I think they have a very, very important role. And most important is that the system functions and that there is cooperation. And where I'm very proud of is at Europol, full transparency also towards the supervision. Because that comes together, on the one side, cooperation, but you need a cooperation where there is the full transparency regarding the processing operation. And this is how we understand the system here at Europol.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Those kind of the collaboration is very important to keep be transparent to the societies and citizens how their data is used for the police networks, which is very informative. And thank you for sharing. The next question is your role is very unique because just your independent role in the organization. So as an independent practices, so what does it means actually your work, and also how can you act independent and be at the same of the Europol and for the future?
Yes, thanks, Kai. I think that is a very important question, and I think it is not just important for the data protection officer of Europol, but I think in general for data protection officers. But of course, I'm the data protection of Europol, so I will try to give you my insight regarding my function that I have here at Europol. And I think there it is important that independency of the data protection officer doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want as a data protection officer. You are integral part of an organization, and you're an internal advisor to management of the organization. And that allows you to shape compliance from the inside of the organization, because we have an external supervisory authority, but we need also somebody that from internal advises controllers and say, you have to adjust this. It is important that you take account this. My advice would be to design the system in the following way. So, of course, there is the question about independency. And then if you're an integral part, or like me, I'm head of a function here at Europol, so I'm also part of the agency's hierarchy, if you want. Then the question is, how do you actually safeguard the independency of that function? In particular, in law enforcement, where hierarchy, of course, is important. And for me, it is very important that the data protection officer of Europol has and had always full access to top management. So there is no question that if the data protection officer would like to communicate with top management and wants to bring forward concerns, that he or she has full access to top management, which is the executive director, but also the management board of Europol. And the data protection officer role is highly respected at Europol. Not only because it's written in the Europol regulation, but also because the controller would like also to rely on an independent advice. within the agency in order then to progress on processing operations. And the fact that the data protection officer is an internal function allows me also to have an impact as soon as possible on the processing operation. So when actually ideas are developed, when systems are designed, then the risk for data subjects are still rather low because the processing operations didn't take place yet. And the advantage then as an internal independent assurance provider is that you can advise the controller very early already in the process, and also make clear in case they're concerned what are exactly the concerns, but also to support the controller by saying, well, maybe we can design the processing operation in this way, which provides you with a much more solid documentation regarding the respect to fundamental rights of data protection. There are two other very important safeguards for the independency of the data protection officer at Europol. I think the first one is the Europol data protection officer, I think, is the only data protection officer in the EU public service that has an obligation to provide an annual report of his activity to the management board and to the EDPS at the same time. This is, in my view, a safeguard for the independency of the data protection officer. And the second strong safeguard is legal safeguard, is that the data protection officer has the possibility to escalate matters up to the highest body, if you want, within Europol, which is the management board, and then or even to the European Data Protection Supervisor as a final step of this escalation scale. Whenever the data protection officer finds that data protection compliance is not according to the legal provisions. So that is another very strong safeguard for the independency of the data protection officer. But apart from this legal safeguard, I think it is the most important is that the data protection officer is a trusted internal advisor, and that is good for data protection, and that is good for the whole system, because the system is indeed, you have a controller, then you have a data protection officer as a so-called second line assurance provider, and you have the data protection supervisory authority, which is then an external data protection supervision, an additional most important layer for compliance with data protection rules. And that makes the function interesting, a bit like an internal auditor, if you want, but still distinct, because data protection officers have a strong task in providing awareness on data protection, providing training, and providing consultancy as well to the controller, which means that as a data protection officer, you have to be always on top of developments, and the controller actually has a legal obligation to inform you about developments in process operation. Which, as such, this obligation again is in fact also supporting the independent assurance function of the data protection officer.
Now that's absolutely interesting. Maybe as an independent role that you can do as the primary things, internal operations, advising of the practitioners to teach about the data protection, and also the very important notice for the fundamental rights. So that's been a very respectful. So as a final topics, I'm happy to ask you about the message for listeners, because you have many of the great experiences and also the commitments such as the community making. So could you share your message, Daniel?
Yes, thanks, Kohei. So my final message. Maybe I have different final messages if you allow me. So my one of my final messages to the data protection officers and to the supervision actually, and to those that provide assurance on data protection matters, would be that I think we have to understand that they have a very crucial role, and the crucial role is actually to provide legal certainty and assurance in an area that is highly regulated, and because it is multidisciplinary, also quite sophisticated. And I think the controller needs assurance, and what the controller doesn't need are actually gray areas. The controller needs a legal certainty where he can invest his resources and can go forward. And I think that the data protection officers and also the supervision has a crucial role in this for the controller. So that would be my final message to the data protection officer colleagues: clear up the gray areas, provide the certainty for the controller. That is what we are there for. When I hope that the law enforcement officers as well that are watching your video, Kohei, but I think for the law enforcement officers, I would say, during the last 20 years, police laws, at least in the European Union, but I'm sure it is the same in Japan, got bigger and bigger and bigger. So they started quite slim and now they're huge. And part of it is that there are a lot of data protection rules added for the activities of the police, tailor-made rules. And I always say, don't consider these tailor-made rules as obstacles. I think it's a privilege for law enforcement to operate on the basis of rules that are made specifically for them, because that also again shapes more legal clarity for the work of for law enforcement. And indeed, the work of law enforcement is distinct from the rest of the public service. So in my view, this is a privilege that the legislator considers law enforcement as special, and therefore they get special tailor-made rules, and it is not an obstacle for the work. And my really very last final message would be to all the listeners by saying, if you're interested in police, law enforcement, and data protection compliance within the police, join Europol's Data Protection Expert Network. It doesn't matter whether you are within the EU or outside of the EU. If you work in that area and you have a particular interest in that area, join us for the conference, or join even the network as a member yourself. And I know, Kohei, you joined us rather recently, so thank you for this. But I think it's worth to work in this special interest group, that's true, but quite crucial when it comes to the protection of the fundamental right of data protection on the one side, and on the other side also allowing law enforcement to fulfill its mandate.
Yeah, thank you for your message. It's been very important to the data protection community to engage with the police network to share the resources, the experiences, how we can create for the future, which is a very important commitment each other. The community, the network, as a gateway for all the data protection experts to join and share the experiences to enhance in each other. So that's very important message for the future collaborations. So again, thank you for having the great times with Daniel, and let's engage the enhancement together for this discussion.
Thanks a lot, Kohei, for inviting me and giving me the time to talk about law enforcement and data protection.
Yeah, thank you.